morning, everyone. My name's Andrew Donoghue. I'm the Regional Manager for Australia and New Zealand for Vytelle. Just before Bruno starts, and I don't want to eat up into his time, I just wanted to talk you through a little bit of background about Vytelle and our operation in Australia. Vytelle is a precision livestock company, and our mission is to ensure that meat and milk are viable and competitive food choices for future generations. When we look at the challenges facing livestock producers today, we call it a triple challenge, which is increasing global demand for protein, has to be done in a sustainable manner, and has to be economic for the producer. Traditionally, this genetic progress has been hampered by lack of labour, limited data, and unpredictable results. And Vytelle is here to make sure that we can advance that using our tools and do it faster. A lot of you may be aware of the company called GrowSafe, which has had a good standing in Australia for some time. So 2 years ago, Vytelle and GrowSafe were merged together by the owner of both companies, and we now operate under the banner of Vytelle. And what we have is three different offerings, or three different arms to our business. We have the feed efficiency data capture, which is the old GrowSafe hardware. We have insights and analytics, which comes out of the GrowSafe systems, but is also linking into the advanced systems. And we have what we call advanced, which is our IVF technology. And that's what Bruno's here to talk to you about today. Globally, we've got a footprint around 21 countries around the world. We've got 168 feed efficiency testing sites globally, capacity to test 170,000 head a year. And we now have 15 global IVF labs. One of the most recent was New Zealand last year, and as of July this year, that'll move to 16 when we open our lab in Brisbane in Australia. What do we look like in Australia? We've been here through the GrowSafe arm. We've been set up in Australia since 2010. We have 16 sites across Australia doing feed efficiency testing, and that's grown significantly over the last 5 or 10 years, more due to the focus on efficiency and how it relates to sustainability, and that's a really strong point of our business. We've been actually doing IVF in Australia for 3 years through a partner lab, which is offering IVF services to one dairy client in New South Wales, and we've made tens of thousands of embryos already using IVF in New South Wales. And in 6 weeks' time, we'll be opening our Brisbane lab to offer commercial IVF services to the Australian marketplace. What does that look like? And we're all about making IVF accessible, reliable and predictable is what we try and do with our services. So whilst our lab will be based in Brisbane for reasons of accessibility, we have different models on how we operate. We come to you on farm, and that's really important. We have critical numbers to do that, but we will come on farm. We also have what we call a satellite model using donor centres and satellite centres. We already have in place discussions to have satellite locations in Oakey, Tamworth and Orange, and what that allows people to do is to access our technology without having to have enough head on farm for us to come to. So those sites will hopefully either house donors for a period of time that we can come and do, or also allow you to bring donor cows in for the day while we do our IVF, do the open pickup, and then you can take them home again. The satellite model has been made possible, and Bruno will speak to this, by our success and what we've done with the ability to freeze IVF embryos and implant them at a later date. So we don't rely on just doing fresh transfers. We can get some good success out of frozen IVF as well. I'll let Bruno come up and talk. He knows this is his field, and yeah, feel free to ask a lot of questions when he's done. Thank you.
Hi, mate. On my 17 hours flight from Dallas, Texas, I was practicing how I could show up today and say, "Good day, Mike," and greet you guys. So thank you so much for having us today. I would like to thank to Angus, Australia, for the opportunity of talking a little bit about the Vytelle technology, what we developed along the years. So it's 20 years in this industry, work with animal reproduction, and to me it's an honor to be here today, and super impressed with the quality of the discussions yesterday, and I'd like to congratulate you guys for the meeting. So speaking of accent, so if you don't understand my broken English, we can start over. Just let me know and we try again. So moving forward, a little bit about the history of the reproductive technologies. So we're starting on the 30s with AI. That time is still fresh semen, and you can see that the frozen semen that we know today was developed on 50s. And then embryo transfer, what we call the ET or the flushing embryos, was first done commercially back in 70s. So we're talking about a technology that is around for a long, long time. And IVF is also not new. So commercially, IVF started to be used in commercial herds in bovine on 90s. And by 97, only 8% of all embryos produced in the world, they were made by IVF. So most of the embryos transferred, they were still made by ET, or the flushing that we call. And then by 2003, sex semen was launched. So we have here today companies selling short semen, and how much progress we've made on sex semen for the last 20 years in terms of conception rates. Then genomic test by 2009. So do you believe that today the genomic test that you guys do is more reliable and more accurate than it was in 2009? I believe so. And then by 2014, half of the number of all embryos produced in the world, they were by IVF already. And more recently, in 2021, we're talking about official data from the International Embryo Transfer Society. 80% of all embryos transferred today, they are coming from IVF. So that shows the progress that the technology has done for the last years. May I change? Okay, but when you go around in the US or in Australia, you start talking about IVF, what people have experienced so far. Can you pass, no? Okay, we had some comments that we hear from people that they experience IVF the best. And most of them, they are like, I don't want to use hormones on my donors, and the company or my provider still requires that I give some shots on my donors to do IVF, and I don't want to do so. Or I've done IVF sometimes, and we didn't make any embryos, or we didn't make many embryos, and I still had a big bill, a big invoice to pay. Or I've done IVF, I made the embryos, and I didn't have good conception rates. Or I have to use fresh only because the frozen embryos doesn't stick. Or my ET vet, my ET veterinarian, is working with us for 25 years. Now became a family member. And I don't want to go to IVF because I don't want to lose that relationship. So this is the most common comments that people that has used IVF for the last 20 years, they mention one or all the above that we just discussed. And my goal today is to talk about a new era of IVF. As your sex semen genomic test, the technology that we use today, they evolved along the way. The same happened with IVF, and I want to discuss a little bit about today. So why using IVF? For those ones that they never used or is not familiar with, so we can maximize production of our females, we can collect pregnant animals, or we can collect very young animals, talking about genomics. So once you identify the best animals in your herd, well, we could multiply those animals in a faster pace and at a younger age, you could short generation interval in your herd. We have geneticists talk about genetic improvement later today. So also we can use more expensive or more rare semen with more efficient. So we have a lot of advantages on using IVF. Basically, you have 3 steps: the collection, the ovum pickup, or the aspiration, embryo production, and the implantation of the embryos, fresh or frozen. So usually the timeline is around 8 or 9 days, depending on if you are using fresh or frozen embryos. Everything starts with the OPU and the oocyte selection on farm. And then 24 hours later, we do the fertilization. We grow the embryos in the incubators for 7 days. And then we freeze those embryos, or we transfer them fresh into the recipients. So that, for those ones that they want fast forward generations, IVF is unbeatable today. So any other reproductive technology can beat IVF in terms of fast forward generations in your herd. And a little comparison between those technologies, so AI, ET, and IVF. So we can repeat IVF because we don't use hormones, we don't set up donors, we can repeat the technology in theory. We can repeat it every 7 days. If you want to know in a very short time collect your donors, we can repeat the aspirations every 7 days. The conception rate today is around 50%. When I started doing IVF 20 years ago, 25-30% we were happy. Today, if you don't have 45-50%, you are not in the industry. So in the US, it's super competitive, the game. And when you are doing AI, you are leveraging only the male genetics. And when we do ET or IVF, you are leveraging both sides, the female and the male side. And this is a comparison when you do AI versus embryo transfer. So because you are using male and female genetics, you are leveraging both sides. Takes 5 generations doing AI to achieve the same progress that you can make with embryo transfer. So that's the game changer. 5 generations in bovine, we're talking about 20-25 years. So you can make that progress in your first generation if you use IVF. Here's some data. So we're talking about the advantage of IVF, but are people adopting the technology? Well, here's some data. So since 2016, the red line here is IVF, and the blue line is embryo transfer, the flushing embryos, the superovulation. So IVF is growing exponentially, and the ET technology is disappearing. So if you go to South America today, nobody does flushing anymore. In the US, here's the data for US. In the US, the same. So flushing is disappearing, has been replaced by IVF because of the advantage that we see on IVF today. Here's some data for the last 10 years for dairy in the US. So dairy farmers usually they adopt technology in the US. They adopt technology quicker, but also in beef since 2019 already we make more IVF embryos than flushing embryos. So the technology has evolved and people is adopting the technology more and more. So here's, I know that I think Neogen is talking about genomics later, but here's the curve of the genomic tests in the US as well. So any correlation with genomic tests? So it's not coincidence. So once people find who are the outliers, which animals are better and more productive, you gotta do something with them. You gotta multiply them. And IVF is the first choice today to multiply your outliers. So everything starts with donor selection. For sure, we can collect very young animals until they are 100 days pregnant. So that brings a lot of flexibility on your herd. And everything starts with the ovum pickup. We don't do any FSH, any shots. We identify the follicles via ultrasound, and we collect the donors. We built a mobile lab on farm. We search for the eggs on farm. We bring them to the lab. In this process, we don't use FSH, we don't use hormones, so it's easier on animals. Is less labor, less cost, because we don't use any kind of donor preparation. So then we bring the eggs to the lab, we fertilize them, and the process takes 7 days to complete. And during this process, important to say, we don't use any fetal serum. So we've discussed about the issues that people had in the past. Some of those issues were like, I had issues with my calves. They were born large, big calves, whatever. So it's because in the past, it's still today, some companies, they use fetal serum on their media, and that caused some calving issues. So Vytelle developed a technology where we don't use fetal serum to grow our embryos. So that makes the embryos more healthy and better calves on the ground as well. So then we implant those embryos, and here's when you talk about relationship with your embryo technician. We don't want to take them out of business. So we welcome, if you have an existing veterinarian today, that they are doing your embryo transfer, you are happy with their results, you trust them, great. We can make those embryos, and we want to work with them. We want to then transferring your embryos, managing your recipient. We don't want to take the entire pie. We want to collaborate with your embryo transfer technician in this journey. Again, two steps of the process. The donor management is crucial. So if we don't have a good oocyte to work with, we are not successful. And the IVF process and the recipient management. So 3 pillars of success. Before we move on, can you understand me? More or less? Okay. So talking a little bit about freezing embryos. So I want to highlight this. So I truly believe that this technology is going to fly and be adopted in large scale when people trust the frozen embryos. So I know that some of you guys maybe used IVF frozen embryos in the past with inconsistent results. Good news is today we have technology that works and can deliver consistent results on frozen embryos. So why to freeze those embryos? Recipients are the major cost in this game. We can freeze the surplus of embryos, and we can also export those embryos if we freeze them with direct transfer methods that we're going to discuss a little later. To freeze those embryos, we have basically 2 strategies, and people play with the freezing rates or the concentration of the cryoprotectant. And today in the industry we have 2 methods to freeze embryos. One we call direct transfer, DT, is the same technology that you have been using with flushing embryos for 30 years. And the other one we call vitrification. So vitrification, people use cryoprotectants and kind of sugars to cover the embryos during the freezing process. Your embryos, they are like the apple candy. You create a glass around the embryos. However, the vitrification technology requires a technician to thaw those embryos, to give, you have to transfer those embryos well to well. And the direct transfer is like semen. You put in the water, you transfer to your recipients, and you move on. So Vytelle, we don't use vitrification. We only freeze our embryos with direct transfer technology, which gives you more flexibility on frozen embryos. Recipient is key. So no matter everything that we discussed here, donor management, oocyte quality, semen quality, a great media set to grow your embryos in the incubator, once you have a grade 1, good quality embryo to work with, if your recipients are not ready or you are not properly set up, we are just wasting time and money on transferring those embryos. So it's crucial to work with your veterinarians on your recipient management as well. We can help. We can share our experience with that. But again, we welcome your vets and your experience so far on recipient management to handle this step. Frozen embryos are a game changer. So especially in a country like Australia, also US, Brazil, where the logistics is a challenge. Big country, big herds, long distance, relying on the logistics on fresh embryos. Everything needs to click as a clock. Is very risky. So leveraging frozen embryos, having those embryos sit on the tank to be used in the best time, to me is what is going to move this industry even faster. The same what happened with semen in the past. So historically, IVF was used as your last resort. We use IVF for those donors that they don't respond to superovulation anymore, so they don't work on the flushing anymore. And then more recently, the technology, the IVF technology now is your first choice. So people move and change the mindset from last resort to first choice. And if we grow an embryo that is super healthy, that embryo is going to freeze well, is going to survive to the freezing process, no matter the method that we use. So we use direct transfer because is the most commercially viable technology. But if you freeze a in vivo embryo, a flushing embryo today, if you have a healthy embryo, that embryo is going to survive to any freezing method. And how we grow that embryo without serum, giving that embryo the conditions to be healthy at the end of the process, that is the key factor to have good results on freezing. And lastly here, so again, I want to highlight your relationship with your vet. So we don't want to disrupt that, respect that, and we welcome everyone to join us in this journey and make IVF technology reliable, accessible, and affordable to the Australian industry. Thank you so much.